CFMOTO!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show, and today we have something very cool and a little bit different, because this right there, that is the CFMOTO 800NK. I finally got my hands on one of the coolest bikes, one of my most anticipated bikes as soon as I heard it, because this thing right here, $8,499 for a KTM 790? Seems like a screaming deal to me. Now things are looking a little bit different today because I actually have this bike on loan from CFMOTO and Family Power Sports out in the hills here in Austin. And I get to do a ton with this motorcycle, including taking it out to COTA literally next weekend. This bike has 28 miles on it. So today what we're gonna go do is we're gonna do my first impressions, and we're gonna break down this motorcycle as I break it in. So let's mount up and I'll walk you through some of the specs on this bike.
All right, so CFMOTO NK 800. First thing that I want to talk about is the engine. So this thing is powered by the 800, the 799cc licensed KTM motor, which, I mean, when you hear it start up, you'll hear exactly how KTM it is. Take a quick listen here. Yeah, I mean, it literally starts just like a KTM. It's making 95 horsepower and about 60 foot-pounds of torque. I think it's 58 foot-pounds of torque with a nice 410-ish wet weight, which is, again, very KTM. It's very light. And you definitely feel it as you're sitting side to side. I will say seat height is pretty tall on this. I'll have the exact number on screen. But I'm got just a very, very soft bend in the knee. I'm essentially reaching for the ground if the seat height is any taller. Now, pulling away here, I do want to go over a little bit of the technology. So the most important thing to talk about here is the price, because that's going to help indicate how wild all of this stuff is, because most of the people are getting pretty desensitized to technology on motorcycles. The only thing that gets people excited now is a lot of tech for a low price. So this bike, the MSRP is $84.99 or $85.99. It's stupid cheap. It's stunning how much bike you're getting. You're getting a full TFT dash. You're getting a bunch of different ride modes. Well, 3: road, rain, they call road street, and then you have sport mode. And one thing I really like is you just have a nice mode button. Everybody should just have a mode button. I talk about that a lot, where I'm switching around modes and so forth, and I'm having to do it by diving into menus. I had to do it on the Super Duke, and that drives me nuts. I was kind of expecting to have to do that on this bike, and then I saw a giant mode button, and I was like, oh yes, thank you God. You also have cruise control on here from stock, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, but you have cruise control built in. You have pretty badass J1 brakes. I know they're not Brembo, and I know some people are going to be like, J1, but no, they're a famous Spanish brand. They're making good gear, and they feel really nice on this bike. Go CFMOTO! This thing 100% has the KTM vibes of, yeah, let's go break some rules. And you know what? I appreciate that, because there's not enough motorcycles out there that just enjoy the chaos quite like a KTM does. And to feel that so alive here is just it's just a nice feeling. I love embracing the madness sometime, and I think the bike looking as aggressive as it does and having that kind of energy is really nice. Now, since we are on the highway, I do want to talk a little bit about the highway ride of this. It's pretty stable. It's pretty stable. It's lightweight, and I do definitely feel the front end tending to bounce around. Now, looking down, I do see a arm built into the lower triple tree that's definitely meant for a steering stabilizer. And if this were my bike, I would probably spring for a steering stabilizer, just because I am noticing a tendency for it to, bounce and wiggle. I get that a lot on lighter bikes, and the steering stabilizer helps. I think another thing that would help is if I were able to set my suspension. I haven't done that quite yet, but it would definitely make a big difference. I feel like the rear end is sort of squatting down. It just feels like it's not quite dialed in right. So I'm gonna have to take a look at putting some preload into this motorcycle. And as you're probably noticing, cruise control, baby! $8,500 and you get cruise control. You do not get roll to kill though, so that's a bit of a bummer. I would really like to see roll to kill added in a future iteration of this motorcycle. It's the standard. It's a very good thing to have on your bikes, and you should just have it. Other than that, I have very few highway complaints with this motorcycle, aside from the fact that it's a naked bike and I'm getting a ton of wind blast in my face, which you should expect if you're getting a naked bike. The little like fairing shape here, I'm not sure if it's just aesthetic or if it's meant to help. I'm not feeling any major difference. I also have a ton of stuff on my handlebars, as you can tell, and that definitely causes a lot more turbulence. But if I'm sitting upright, I get nice clean air over my head, and the mirrors aren't causing any weird disruptions either. They're also really, really nice. They're very stable at highway speeds. You can actually see what's happening. Are the handlebars a little buzzy? Sure, but no more than any other big bore parallel twin. They all kind of buzz and vibrate. That comes with the territory. But now, let's get this thing out of traffic and let's get it over to a twisty road. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Flying Eyes.
Y'all have heard me talk about Flying Eyes before, and it's because they make the best sunglasses for motorcyclists. Their frames are super thin, so they don't create pressure points between your head and your helmet, and the frames are made of a super tough yet flexible plastic, so they're virtually indestructible. My frame's a choice of the Kingfishers, but they've got a bunch of different styles and tons of colors to choose from. Speaking of which, they have a scratch warranty, so if you say toss your glasses off your bike and need them replaced, Flying Eyes has you covered. They even have prescription-ready frames, so you don't have to worry about riding in contacts anymore. Once you try them out, there's no going back. Click that link down in the description below to check out all the styles they have to offer, and use the code SC10 for 10% off your order.
Alrighty folks, I've put down about 50 or so miles into this ride on a mix of nice, long, flowy roads like this and some tighter, twistier stuff. And I'd like to talk a little bit about this bike's performance in the place that you want it to really perform, the back roads. So, first and foremost, what can I say about this motorcycle's handling? I mean, it's great. It handles really, really well. I think that the rear shock is definitely a little bit squished. I think if I put a little bit more preload into it, it would definitely feel a little bit better and possibly a little bit more stable. So let me remind you that there is a spot on here for a steering stabilizer. There's an armature on the lower triple tree, which makes me think that there's probably going to be an R version that comes out, or the equivalent of an R version, that'll have a steering stabilizer. It'll have the quick shifter by default. It'll have all of this other cool stuff, and probably even a track mode. As it stands right now though, I mean, this handling is perfect for anybody who's just goofing around in their local back roads. One thing that is slightly irksome about this bike, and it's more pronounced when you're either A, on the highway in 6th gear, or B, when you're goofing around in the city and you're dealing with a lot lower speeds. There's something about the middle of the power band that just doesn't feel quite right. It feels like there's a lot of emissions tomfoolery happening. It feels like there's a nice good hit down low, and then it feels like we got a nice big surge at the top, and then in the middle is just this sort of valley of adequacy, shall we say. It's fine. It's totally fine. And if I gear down a little bit and go through this corner, I've got power. The bike's pulling well. It just feels like perhaps I'm waiting a little bit to get north of 7,000 RPM. There's just something going on. And you know what? It's not just because it's the CFMOTO. I've felt this in KTMs too, where the middle of the power band just isn't where they're very happy, especially in stock trim. I'm sure if you were to put a tune on this thing, it would definitely wake it up a little bit more. Now that we're in some tighter, more aggressive stuff, you know, there's not really too much that's aggressive here in Texas, but this is about as good as we got. Let's talk about the brakes. So, brakes on this thing are J1 brakes, not Brembos. Now, a lot of people are like, J1, what? I've never heard of them. They're basically Spanish Brembo. They've been making high-quality braking components for a while, and there's actually a handful of bikes that use J1. I believe the first FTR had J1 brakes. I believe that the Zeros are using J1 brakes, and a couple of other bikes I don't remember off the top of my head. Basically, whenever Brembo is too expensive, there's J1 for a nice alternative. They're not like the most powerful things in the whole wide world, and they're certainly not Brembo monoblocks or whatever, but you know, they're more than getting the job done on this guy. And let me get some juice going here. Whee! The feeling through the lever on this is very nice. The master cylinder is a nice radial one. The pull is super gentle. You get good initial feedback and even more power as you want it. This is a good braking setup. Now, it's totally true that a brake that's adequate or good on the street can fall apart on the racetrack. So I will let you know if I encounter any issues when I take this thing out to COTA. But for the average guy or gal who's riding around on the street, these brakes are solid. Give it a little bit going into this corner. Yep. It feels awesome. Really, the biggest question I have about this bike is, where were the corners cut? Because as I'm riding this thing around, I'm struggling to find something in the riding experience that is dragging this motorcycle back, that's causing this bike to not feel premium, you know? And obviously it's an $8,500 bike, so it's not going to feel like, it's not going to feel as pulled together as, you know, a Tuono or even the Tuono 660. It's not going to be that pulled together because it's not that expensive. But am I seeing like panels starting to fall off and stuff? No. Is the electronics suite giving me problems? No. Are the brakes cheap? No. In fact, the clusters on here are better than anything I've felt at this price point from any Japanese bike, period. Ooh, now we're getting into some wet stuff. I do have to cook it back a little bit, but hey, I have rain mode. I have to turn cruise control off to switch the modes. That's interesting. But yeah, I just pop it into rain mode and away we go. Ooh, these are always so slick when it gets wet. Honestly, if I had to guess, I don't think CFMOTO is planning to make money on this motorcycle in the first model year. I really, really don't. I think that this bike is probably going to be a loss leader for a year or two. I feel like they're not going to make their money back on this thing probably for the next 2 years. They'll sell it at $85 this year. Next year they'll sell it for $9,000. Year after that it'll be $9,200 or $9,299. That feels to me about right. $9,299. So you're getting like a, what is that, a $700, $800 discount, almost $1,000. I struggle to find the faults. It's just that nice of a package, and I really am. I'm pleased to report that through the first 50 and 60 and 70 miles that I've ridden this motorcycle, let's see, I've put 96 miles down on this bike, and they have been 96 of some of the most fun miles I've had in a minute. It's responded well to abuse. It's responded well to easygoing riding like this. The suspension is nice and compliant. I'm very happy with this bike. I'm very happy with it. But this is just the first ride. I'm going to have this thing for a while. I'm going to do the first service on this bike. I'm going to take it to COTA. I'm going to run you through the technology on here. I'm going to give you all of that stuff, and I'm going to compare it to a handful of different bikes, including the MT-09 SP, because I think that would be a ton of fun. So, if you want to get yourself some more CFMOTO 800NK content, hit that subscribe button down below. And if you'd like to support the channel, click the link down in the description below and check out the Patreon. That's the best way for you to support what I'm doing. And while you're down there, don't forget to check out Flying Eyes. They are the best sponsor for the channel. They've been around forever. I love working with Flying Eyes. And while it's a bit dark and dreary today, I still have my flying eyes right on my face. With that, guys, I will catch you in the next one. See you later.